Hi, I'm Dr. Annadale, and today I'm starting a new video series about this book, The Christian Idea of Man by Josef Pieper. I'm going to do just a short video on each of the sections in the work. There are 9 sections total. So I'll introduce the work today and talk about section 1. At the end of this video, I'll stand up and show you the t-shirt that I'm wearing, which is kind of fun. This essay is from 1949. And in this edition, the 2011 St. Augustine Press edition, there's an introduction by John Haldane noting the similarities between Josef Pieper's 1949 essay and Elizabeth Anscombe's 1958 essay, Modern Moral Philosophy, which helped to launch the revival of virtue ethics in the second half of the 20th century. Like Anscombe, Pieper redirects our attention in ethical philosophy towards the anthropological question, the notion of man, the idea of the human person that undergirds our philosophical reasoning. Rather than a system of rules or utility maximization, we should have an ethics that directs our attention towards being a certain kind of person, instantiating certain virtues in our behavior and in our character. So, let me take a look first today at the first section of this book, which is titled The Idea of Man in General, and it is less than 2 pages long. A couple of important points in it. Pieper begins with the first sentence of part 2 of Aquinas' Summa Theologia. Aquinas writes, "Because man is created as the image of God, it now remains, after his, God's, archetypal image has been dealt with, to speak of his reflection, namely, man." So for Thomas, this is the transition between part 1 of the Summa, dealing with God, and part 2 of the Summa, dealing with man. And Aquinas does this by noting that man is made in the image of God. Now, having looked at the original and the perfect, now we look at the creature, the sort of pilgrim on his way towards becoming perfect, being reunited with God. Haldane, in his introduction, notes that in some ways this entire essay by Pieper is simply a meditation or homily on that one sentence from Thomas. What Pieper says immediately after quoting it is that many of us Christians have lost sight of the meaning of this insight from Thomas. He notes 3 things that we have lost track of. Namely, that moral teaching is, first and foremost, teaching about man. Second, that moral teaching must make the idea of man visible. And third, that therefore Christian moral teaching must deal with a Christian exemplar of man. Now let's take those in order. First, that moral teaching is about man. Ethical philosophy is about the human person, the human being, the one who acts. We make a mistake if we make it about some set of abstract rational principles divorced from the anthropological reality of man. Second, that moral teaching, now to instruct people morally, to teach them to become better, must make the idea of man visible. So to become good, to help people to become good, means helping them to approach a certain ideal of moral excellence. We might think of, again, of Aristotle's insight from the beginning of the Ethics, that one studies ethics not to learn abstract truths, but in order to become good, to become a good man. And third, that Christian moral teaching, specifically Christian philosophy, must deal with a Christian exemplar of man. That ultimately, of course, will be Christ, but that is the purpose of the book's title, The Christian Idea of Man. So that Christian ethics should be informed by a Christian anthropology, a Christian vision of what human beings are and are meant to be. So continuing then with the book, he notes that this idea, also expressed in a quote from Meister Eckhart from the early 14th century, people should not think so much about what they ought to do, they should think about what they ought to be. In this regard, I think back to a quote from Plato's Apology, in which Socrates notes that one ought only to ask whether one's actions, he says, and notice he doesn't say, are they right or wrong actions? He says, are they the actions of a good man or of a bad man? So am I doing the sorts of things that a good person would do, would be the kind of standard of moral evaluation I would apply to myself. Pieper goes on to note that even some Thomistic textbooks in his time, in the 1930s and 40s, have lost this central point. He says, instead, for us, the concept of ethics is the teaching about doing and leaving undone, of being allowed, and above all, not being allowed, of what is commanded, and above all, of what is forbidden. So this is the ethics of rules. This is the ethics of what is permitted and what is forbidden. We might tend to fall into just this trap of thinking, of course, that if I want to do any particular thing, I may ask, am I allowed to do it? Does ethics allow me to do it? And if so, then I'm untouchable. Nobody can criticize me for doing what I am permitted by ethics to do. But this somehow misses the point. I would add myself, extending this point, that if we fall into the trap of an ethics of rules and exceptions, right? What is permitted, and then the rare cases in what is forbidden, and then what is in the rare cases under certain circumstances permitted. If we think in that framework, we end up giving an enormous amount of power to the people who know the rules and the people who can determine the exceptions, the people who can present themselves as the authorities in what the exceptions are, the rare cases where the rule does not apply. Those people acquire then a tremendous amount of power in this way of thinking. And I think the abuse crisis in the church, among other things it's exposed the hazard of this type of moral thinking among ordinary people. We need to overcome this and I think return to a richer virtue-based understanding of ethics, something better than rule following. Pieper concludes, so the first teaching of Thomas is ethics is about the right conception of man. If your ethics does not lead you to conceive of, to form an accurate picture of what human beings are and are capable of, it's not going to be an effective ethics. Naturally, it is also concerned with doing and duties and commands and sins, but its primary object and the foundation for everything else is man's proper existence and the image of a good person. So there, just in less than 2 pages, I think Pieper has taken us towards the central insight of this work, which is going to be that ethics ultimately is about the human person, and it's about having the correct conception, the correct idea of the human person and of human moral excellence in all of its subtlety and in all of its different dimensions. That's the end of section 1. I'll take a look at section 2 in the next video. And as I promised at the beginning, I'll show you the t-shirt I'm wearing. This is a present from my sister. It's my life, the universe, and everything Venn diagram t-shirt. Of course, they intersect at the number 42. So that's the end of this video. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and the rest of the series. Thanks for watching today. Goodbye.